When I was assaulted, I wanted to know what to expect, which might sound silly, but all I really wanted was a list of things I would feel, things I wouldn't feel, what the rest of my day, week, month, life would look like in the wake of what had happened. I wanted a 7 stages of grief of you've just been assaulted. First comes anger, then comes pain, then comes you can't get on the bus anymore. It would have been fantastic to already understand that the shame that boiled up in the seconds after my assault took place was something other people had felt as well, and that I could expect to feel for a certain amount of time before it transitioned into something else. But I had no idea what I was in for, because how can one have an idea of how they'll react to a uniquely horrible experience? And this is by no means a how-to guide for dealing with life after assault. This is more so me forgiving myself for the way I blamed myself for what happened, for something that was not my fault, and for speaking honestly about some of the things that I struggled with and don't understand still. So in October last year, I had just finished a shift at work. It was still getting dark early, but I walked down to the bus stop, and it's this big transit, interchange where all of the buses converge. There's 3 stations, and I was waiting at the end one for the last bus, which pulled up, and then we were told we weren't allowed to get on because it needed to pull up into a different stop. So I and about half a dozen other people were waiting when a woman approached me, spoke to me, asked me for money. I didn't have change, I was paying by card, and she walked off. She made a big fuss because she wasn't happy that I was paying by card, and she didn't understand why I wouldn't carry cash. And she looked around and saw that I was pulling a slightly surprised expression, and then she charged me. And I didn't know just how frightened I would be. In the wake, I didn't know how indescribably angry I would be. But in the moment of it happening, of this complete stranger running at me and whacking me full across the face so hard that I fell over, I didn't know just how incredibly scared I would be. I'm kind of glad that I didn't know that, because I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. I also didn't know how much it would hurt. I thought that my nose had broken. It was so painful, and I was just in complete shock as this woman stood over me, and another passenger who I since have seen and thanked randomly for getting involved, stepped in between us and stopped her from continuing to attack me. And then she immediately walked off screaming how she didn't do anything to me, how she didn't lay a hand on me. The bus driver opened the doors so I could get on, closed the doors for everyone else, and kind of encouraged me to file a police report, which at that stage I had no intention of doing. I was completely out of it. I was in pain, and I was shocked, and I was scared, and I really wanted to call my mum, but I had 2% on my phone, and I knew it would die if I called her, and I didn't want her to be worried. So I didn't call her, and I got some details from the bus driver, but I had no intention of putting in a police report because I had no faith that anything would happen. Surprisingly, there was no mark left on my face for the strength with which I was belted. I didn't break any bones, but I did get a relatively small bruise come up behind my tattoo that was incredibly painful. I have a desk at my work, and every time my arm touched it, it was a painful reminder of what I was telling no one had happened. I didn't know that so much would change and also nothing would change. How I felt and how I responded to things in the wake of this assault, so different. It has been many, many months. We are well into February and I have not got that bus again. And I'm very glad that I haven't. I haven't even been driven by that bus driver again, and a absurd part of me is thankful because I felt so much shame the times I saw her in passing that she might remember me as that person who was attacked and so frightened and vulnerable. Even though I know there's nothing wrong with those reactions, those are perfectly normal reactions to have in the face of something horrible happening to you, but I felt like I could not face anyone who had seen me in that vulnerable state. I didn't know how hard I would be on myself. I immediately started blaming myself for not having money, for engaging, for looking back at her as she swore at me, for not making eye contact as she charged at me. I was ashamed that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I was ashamed that it hurt me, both physically and emotionally and mentally. Because, you know, people say that thing about, like, someone can only hurt you if you give them the power to. No, that is fucking bullshit. Sometimes people take things from you, and it's not your fault. It's their fault. And to blame yourself for something that you have no control over, for the way someone reacts, is so cruel and unkind when you are already in such a vulnerable state. And I wish I had been gentler with myself coming out of that. And I wish I'd held my own hand a little more. I had no intention of doing a police report, even though I knew I should. I was just dealing with shame and didn't think anything would happen. I did file one, and I waited 3 hours for a police officer to come. 3 hours where I was getting a migraine, emotionally drained, and, you know, already tired after a long shift at work. And when that officer finally came, I relived everything. I gave all of the details. I said what she looked like. I said what she did. I reiterated multiple times that I did not know her. And the bus driver had told me that not only do the buses in this area have CCTV, but the building across the road has CCTV that looks onto where we were standing. The police corroborated this and said that I would hear from them in the next couple of days. So I spent the next 2 weeks terrified of my phone. I thought every time it vibrated, I would have to answer this police call, and I didn't know what that would look like or feel like or how to process any of what was happening, let alone a stage further that may or may not happen. Spoiler alert, it didn't happen because the police never called me. And then I started blaming myself, because while I was so terrified of this phone call happening, I was also blaming myself for not making the phone call myself and saying, hey guys, you're meant to be getting in touch with me, what's going on? Any info? Would love to have a gossip about what happened. So I left it and kind of hoped it would go away, and it did. And that made me so angry, because a few days before Christmas, I was at work and my phone went off, and I was busy, so I ignored it, and then it immediately went off again, and I pulled it out and it was an unknown number, and I ignored it because I was busy, and then it went off again. 3 calls in the space of 40 seconds. And I ripped my phone out of my pocket and very angrily answered it, and it was a police officer who was, I can only assume, doing their yearly housekeeping, tidying up the files, letting me know that they hadn't actually, unfortunately, found anything and they were gonna be kind of closing the case. So I was thrown immediately back into all of the emotions of what had happened when finally it had been fading from my mind, because an equally horrible trauma was rearing its anniversary head of when I got propositioned by someone a week before Christmas, someone I trusted and worked with, and I was really, really scared of that anniversary. And then I was dealing with another shit thing. So nothing happened. They didn't pull any footage, they didn't find anything. And I wish I had known how many times I would be asked, pressed, re-asked, repressed on whether I actually maybe knew the person. No, I have never seen her before in my life. So you didn't know her. Again, no. This stranger came up to me in front of half a dozen people and whacked me over the face, and I didn't know her. So you'd never spoken to her before. No, I did not know her. And then I was asked twice by 2 different police officers whether I got a picture of her whilst I was being assaulted, or just after I'd been assaulted. Whether I was on the ball enough to whip out my phone and take a picture, and then forget about taking said picture and need to be reminded by an officer to whip my camera back out and show you the picture of the person who I'm saying I don't know who she is. Right. I didn't know how angry I would be or how upset, because I was so angry that someone thought that they could do that to me or to anyone. And I was so upset that it had happened and that I had somehow allowed it to happen. Again, it's the shame. And I was so frightened. I spent quite a while sobbing in the shower where no one could hear me, and trying to get through my head why this had happened. There is no why. Some people are just dickheads and they do things that we have no control over. I didn't know how scared I would be in the months afterwards, where I continuously thought everyone walking behind me was this woman. Where I was terrified of being at work because I thought, having been in my work uniform when this happened, that she would come and find me at my work, a place where I had not shared that this happened to me, and I did not want to share it. I thought that it would be brought to the light in this big, horrible way, and it would be out of my control again, because that's what this all was. It was so far out of my control, and as someone who likes to have things very ordered and who likes to be in charge, not only of myself but of the world I can be in charge of, that was so scary. I thought I heard her voice. I nearly had a meltdown when I got off the bus one day and was burning time before work, and I thought I heard her coming up behind me. And I realized that maybe I wouldn't recognize this person. Maybe she could be literally anyone. You know, I don't think I remember her face. I remember parts of her. I remember what her hair looked like, and I remember the jumper she was wearing. And I remember the sound of her voice, and I remember what bus she got onto, and that she was allowed to hop on a bus, that nobody stopped her, nobody did a better job of looking after me. And part of me is really afraid because I could walk past her And maybe she wouldn't even recognize me. Maybe she doesn't even remember what she did. Maybe she still doesn't think she did anything wrong. Maybe she's done this to dozens of people. Maybe I was the first and only person that she's ever hit. I hope I'm the first and only person that she's ever hit. I hope she's guilty. I hope she remembers what I look like. I hope someday I'm glad that I don't remember what she looks like. I'm really glad that I am at a stage in my life where I know I don't have to accept apologies, because if she came up to me tomorrow and apologized for what happened, for what she did, not what happened, for what she did to me, for assaulting me, I would not accept her apology. And I don't have to. You don't owe anyone peace of mind for the terrible things they do to you. The last two things that I can think of right now are that I measured what happened to me against every other thing I could think of. Because what happened to me isn't as bad as what happened to you. What happened to me isn't as bad as what could have happened. What happened to me isn't that bad at all. But you can't measure that sort of thing. You can't put yourself through that, and you don't need to. I wish I hadn't been ashamed of being so upset, because my God, I was so ashamed of taking it so hard, as if there was any other way I personally could take it. I imagined people I knew and thought they wouldn't let it affect them like this. In addition to my work uniform, I was wearing my very favourite jacket, which I hadn't had for very long. And I wish that every time I looked at that jacket, I didn't recoil a little bit. I've worn it since, and, you know, I adore it, but a tiny part of me also hates it, because it made me so recognisable. And it holds a memory of this scary, uncertain thing that happened. But I also hold that memory. I am a massive believer in fate and destiny, perhaps annoyingly so, where I'm like, you know what? Maybe I didn't get that job because I was destined for something better. You know, maybe I didn't get published when I was 18 because something really good is coming. And I found myself questioning horribly whether this was meant to happen to me. It's another form of self-sabotage, but I thought, if I believe so deeply that what is meant to be will be, and you're fated for the interactions you have and the things that happen to you, they all lead you to a certain path, and surely this was a path that I was destined to lead, walk, wander. And I wish that had never crossed my mind, because it is so cruel to play these games with yourself, and terrible things happening to you are not your destiny or your fate or the path in life that is set out for you. They're just terrible things that happen. I've been playing a lot of Kirby recently, and sometimes when you least expect it, a little monster comes out of the woodwork and takes a little hit of your health. And sometimes you don't even notice it. Sometimes it's gone in a flash, and sometimes it's like, geez, where'd that come from? And this might be a really bad analogy, but every single little monster that passes Kirby's path is not a necessary aspect of Kirby's story. They're just monsters that appear and disappear. Sometimes there are a lot of them, and sometimes there are none of them. Sometimes Kirby swallows a car and gets to use Turbo Blast and jump over mud puddles. But the point is that jumping over mud puddles is as much a part of Kirby's fate as a little monster appearing out from around a corner. Kirby's real fate is to swallow a car and use turbo boost and have a sick-ass time driving and discover an amazing abandoned theme park. The mud puddles, the little monsters are just things that happen, but they are not fate or destiny or something that you have to go through to become a better person. I didn't go through this so I could become a better person. I was already a good person. I didn't learn incredible life skills. I just ended up a bit traumatized. And I discovered a new level of shame that I could hurl at myself that I wish I had never known. I know that there's no timeline for processing or for moving on. It's just taking things a day at a time and allowing yourself to feel things and talk about things and listening instead to your kindness instead of your fears.